Nepal has been making headlines in the media around the world over the past few weeks. What began as a youth led protest against corruption and misgovernance, triggered by a controversial social media ban, has turned into one of the most powerful movements the country has seen in years. The Gen Z, who are young, digital, and determined, took to the streets against the three largest mainstream parties. Within 48 hours, it led to the resignation of Prime Minister KP Sharma Oli. To get a complete understanding of the issue, you can watch Newsreel Asia's this video. Nepal has appointed its first ever interim woman Prime Minister Sushila Karki. A new cabinet is now slowly taking shape. 8 ministers have been appointed so far, but for millions of Nepalis, this movement is about much more than a change of leadership. It is about the hope of a new Nepal, a country where governance is transparent, corruption is fought, and the voices of people are heard. Organizations like Hami Nepal, youth groups, and political thinkers are coming together to reimagine and shaping the nation's future. To understand these changes and what lies ahead, I spoke to an activist, Prashant Singh, who offers insight into how this movement could transform Nepal's political and social landscape in the months to come. Nepal is at a pivotal point. The Gen Z movement against corruption has brought a significant political change in the country and opened the discussion about the possibility of a new Nepal. But what does this change really mean for the country and its people? And what can we expect in the near and far future? To understand this, I have with me Mr. Prashant Singh, who is a social activist. He is associated with Nagarik Pratham, Citizen First, a non-partisan political movement. So, welcome to the discussion. Because a lot has happened in the country and we are looking at a significant change from here. Is there an idea of new Nepal, and what does this new Nepal look like or will look like in the future?
First of all, thank you, Harshita, for having me here, and also thank you for your compassion for being in Nepal, also your team members. In terms of new Nepal, that's been the dream of Nepali people from 1951 onwards. Because unlike India, Nepal was not directly ruled by the Britishers, and there were some pluses coming out of it, and there were some minuses also, right? The pluses that we can always claim that we were never subdued or ruled by the British or Britishers, but the negatives is that unlike in India, there was almost like 100-year-long effort from the Britishers also to bring in Government of India Acts and many things before 1947 happened, right? So there were at least 90 years or 100 years of history of bringing in some kind of a democratic discourse in India, which was not the case in Nepal. So we basically, in 1951, there were only 2% people who were literate, right? Only 200 people who had completed the grade 10 examinations. So you can imagine, in India, you had already Rabindranath Tagore several decades ago, who had already got a Nobel Prize, right? So there is no comparison between the starting point of India and Nepal. So first of all, we have to keep that in perspective, that Nepal was at least 90 years or 100 years behind India in this democratic journey, right? So therefore, many things that you see right now, if you keep that thing in mind, you will find it very, very natural, because a very, very feudal society, when it tries to create a new country or new nation, obviously it has to deal with very many olden and rotten kind of systems, right? So Nepal is trying to do it one thing at a time. First, we got rid of the feudal system, the Rana aristocracy. Then it took a very long while for us to get rid of the royals also. We became a republic. And then came a great compromise of 2015 constitution. Then again, the talk was of creating a greater or a better Nepal, right? Here we are in 2025, right? And again, we're talking about creating a new Nepal. So this new Nepal thing is going on for a long, long time. And I'm not saying that it's a wrong thing, but it's a long drawn process, just like in India or in any country in the world. It's a long drawn process. So this Gen Z thing has done something great, like irreversible changes in Nepal. For example, I'll just say probably two things that probably in Nepal, corruption would still continue because that happens all over the world. But it will not continue with impunity the way it was happening in the past, right? And I think the administration as well as the elected representatives, they would become much more accountable toward the people. Those two big changes this genZ protests have certainly brought about, but then there would be many issues that needs to be settled in the future also, because we haven't yet done with very many political issues in Nepal. That's not been settled. So the political movements are not going to stop tomorrow because there are so many unsettled issues in Nepal which will continue to keep coming one after another towards the process of creating a genuinely new Nepal.
So, by new Nepal, you mean a corruption-less society and corruption-less governance. So, are there any ways, or are activists and people thinking about creating an organization, to control corruption and to have a check on corruption?
Right now, you're right that new Nepal, the way the genZ kind of agrees, most of them, is about creating more transparency, less corruption, etc. In terms of the kind of institutions, Nepal fortunately has an institution, right? It has got a very good anti-graft system. Much before, it's called Akhtiyar Durupayog Nivaran Ayog. It's like investigation in anybody doing wrong things in Nepal, right? So, abuse of authority, basically, it says, right? So, it's been there much before the Indian Lokpal came about, right? So it has a long history. The trouble was that the head of those institutions is supposed to be keeping an eye on all kind of corruption and doing investigation against that. They were not doing their job because those were lackeys and those were like literally the party members, right? So how they go against the wishes of their party leaders, right? So, of course, there were bureaucrats and all those kind of things. But as you know, in South Asia, there are bureaucrats. Technically, they are non-partisan, but they were not non-partisan. So, the trouble was that those institutions were there, but they were not doing their work, right? Probably we do not need an institution. We just have to make that institution work. That is a challenge here.
And politically and socially, are there any threats that you see emerging when it comes to building a new Nepal?
And one big threat that I think which we have handled this far, and don't mind me saying it, was from India, the state of India, right? So many people in Nepal, including myself, we see people of India and state of India as completely two different things, right? People of India have great love for this country and affection, and it goes both ways, right? But not necessarily the state of India and the state of Nepal also share a similar relationship, right? So, state of India, probably in my way of looking, looks at Nepal much from a security standpoint, less from the human standpoint, more from a security standpoint. It's an Himalayan frontier, right from the Nehru's time. It's seen as a Himalayan frontier, right? So, nothing should go wrong in Nepal. Whoever comes, it has to be a friendly regime to India. That's the number one priority. Whether they are just humane or not, that becomes secondary for the state of India. And for good reasons. I also understand they have their own reasons, right? So therefore, the first worry in Nepal was that will the state of India intervene and try to bring in the old forces like the royals, etc., right? So there was a big confusion, at least for a couple of days in Nepal, right? But now that the government of India also came with a communique very quickly after Sushila Karki took oath, I think that thing is over. Looks like India has completely accepted this thing as a sovereign decision of Nepali people, and therefore that thing is over. So one worry is gone. Now the other worry is that will it backslide, right? Because Nepal has had 7 constitutions, right? So and some of them were very, very regressive, and they became a little bit progressive, and again went the regressive way. So it's been going on for a long, long time, right? So the current one, the second worry among at least progressives like me, democratic people like me, is that it should not backslide into the olden days, right?
Olden days as in
like in 1990, we had another constitution, which allowed the royals to function as a constitutional monarch, etc.
Pro-monarch.
Yeah. But they were never constitutional monarch. They were real monarchs, but only in constitutions they were constitutional monarch, right? So they had their own secretaries and everybody for every department, right? During those days, right? So basically, Democrats like us, we are worried that it should not backslide into those kind of things, because after long and protracted Maoist war and 3 Madhes Andolans with almost more than 17,000 people from both sides getting killed in this bargain, right? We have come to this position. So people like us, the only worry right now is that it should not backslide into that kind of a situation, which I see unlikely now. So I feel a little bit happy about that now.
What about the factions and threats that are emerging within Nepal that may pose as a challenge, in creating?
So in my way, it might be a little bit unpopular narrative in Nepal, but in my honest way of looking, Nepal is stuck between dishonest people and idiots, right now. So actually, any Nepali in his or her sane mind would like to have a ruler or a democratically elected leader who is both sane as well as honest, not insane and honest, right? So that's the trouble right now we have, because populism is having like a great time right now, right? So people, there are a lot of individual personalities coming up in Nepal. Nobody knows what they stand for. Like say, if there are 10 consensus points right now in Nepal's polity, where do they stand on those 10 points? Nobody has any idea. So people are just following any person or somebody as an avatar or something like that, right? So that's a very dangerous situation, right? There is right-wing and left-wing populism all over the world, but that's a different thing. Populism meaning like you say popular things and you not be able to do it while you rule the country, but then you say it to make people happy, your voters happy. That's populism, right? But you still have some arguments, right? So Nepal's populism is not like populism in Turkey or in USA or something like that. Nepal's populism is like they do not have anything to offer on any of the consensus issues. They do not even talk about that. They simply say, I am a great man. I love my country, right? Therefore, give me a chance. I'm the only person who can take care of this country. And some people go in this direction, some people go in that direction. So that thing is going on right now, which is another dangerous thing, because as a democracy, you can follow anybody, but you should know where do they stand on major issues. So that is not clear at this point, and that is a big concern for people like me, who are not that young, right? So we are a little bit concerned that where are we going? We have taken care of one problem, but we don't want to get into some other problem tomorrow, right?
How do you plan to minimize it? Are there any solutions in your mind?
I think it will come out. Obviously, we try to become a midwife and try to create the situation a little bit quickly than it would normally happen. But then I'm a great believer that this will happen. Like there was a party called Rashopa that came on similar populism those kind of arguments, right? And very quickly people realized that they have nothing to offer. They had some beautiful faces and great people, highly educated people, but in terms of ideology or in terms of manifesto, they have not much to offer, right? So they became also run-of-the-mill kind of a party, and very quickly people have now started to forget them, right? So therefore, I guess maybe one or two such experiences, and people will understand that what is this kind of a behavior is going to do to the democracy in Nepal. But right now, the popular wave is slightly not aligned to what I'm saying, right? So therefore, it may happen that some people, only because they're very popular, but they do not have an economic opinion on economy or geopolitics or even politics, right? But they might get elected in the next election. There is a fear. But then, since currently it's not a directly elected executive kind of a president or prime ministerial system, it's a parliamentary democracy. So right now, there is no worry. Anybody who gets elected is just one member of parliament among 164 others, right? So that person can be managed that way.
like you mentioned, directly elected PM. Do you think there is a possibility because the current constitution doesn't allow the election of PM directly? How do you see
There
this
is
system?
no serious discourse in Nepal. I think a lot of people, probably I could say even majority of people in Nepal, now if there is a referendum, probably they would prefer a directly elected chief executive, call it president or prime minister or whatever. But I do not see that there has been a very serious discourse about this as to what are the pros and cons in both these situations, right? One, people are very, very sick and tired of the current thing. So they think that it's not the individuals, the bad leaders or the bad parties which is responsible for the failure of the Westminster style democracy in Nepal. They think that system itself is very, very bad and it never works anywhere. Particularly the communists have thrown this narrative all over Nepal that the parliamentary democracy never works, right? And unfortunately, in Nepal, penetration of English is very, very little. So whatever very newer ideas seldom find space in Nepal's political discourse. People are generally talking about 20-year, 30-year, 40-year-old ideas. They are still talking about it, right? So right now, I must admit that the presidential or directly executed and directly elected executive is a very popular agenda in Nepal. But I think we need to have a very serious discussion about the pros and cons of the both.
Okay. Although the government has changed, right? But the people, the leaders who will work on the ground or who will emerge as politicians again and fight for the elections will be the same people, right? So if new leaders do not emerge in a good number, the old politicians will continue. So how do you make sure that the old politicians do not again continue their corrupt way?
Here, that's why right in the beginning I said that making of a new Nepal, it's a long drawn process, right? We can't say that we have reached the final destination yet, right? Nowhere close, right? So these are the things that we have to handle in the future. The trouble in Nepal is that, unlike in India, when I remember when Nehru became the first prime minister, for probably up until he died, even 6 months before that, he was writing literally every month letters to his chief ministers, right? So to make sure that the spirit of the constitution is understood across the country, right? So somebody like a prime minister is taking so much of effort to make sure that the constitution anywhere in the world is imperfect. Any document is imperfect, but to make it perfect, he made such a big effort. Not just Nehru, many other people, right? But in Nepal, to the contrary, right? Any constitution is a great compromise, and compromise in democracy is a beautiful word, right? It's a very positive word. But compromise for communists is not a good thing, right? So they took compromise as a defeat, right? And in Nepal, the popular democratic narrative, believe it or not, is a communist narrative, which is oxymoronic in, in its own way, right? So the communist narrative is that we wanted to create a People's Republic, etc. China to North Korea, there is a full spectrum, one of them, right? But we ended up into this situation because of the geopolitics and local pressure and international NGOs pressure and this, that. So it is not a final constitution of this country. If you talk to most of the communist leaders in private, not on record, they would say that this is a compromise.
For them, socialism is a compromise.
Yeah. So this kind of a democracy, this kind of a constitution is a compromise, right? So because of that, democracy is not functioning, right? If you have a electric car, you can't put petrol in it, right? So democracy requires a democratic way of thinking, right? So that's not there. So and unfortunately for Nepal, there is just not one communist party. There are at least 2 or 3 big communist parties, and there are dozens of small communist parties. So all of them have this totalitarian thinking. They want to control businesses, they want to control the teachers, they want to control all the unions. So there are dozens of unions, half a dozen union everywhere, right? So this creates this is not a system that a liberal democratic framework, right? You may not be liberal, but The framework is a liberal democratic framework if you look at Nepal's constitution, right? So there is no alignment how the politicians think and how do they operate and what the constitution envisions, right? So there is lack of alignment. Therefore, democracy is not taking root, right? So those problems will come back again. I'm not very hopeful there. But as I said, the democratic process or building of a nation is a very long drawn exercise, and hopefully new things will come, new ideas will come, new protests will come, and slowly we'll learn the lesson. But right now I do not see that these things are going to be settled. In the next election, which is due in just 6 months, you are right in saying that probably at least 50-60% the same people will come back to the power again, right? So they are not going to be completely change of hearts, right? Hopefully they will be a little more accountable. They will be little bit ashamed of doing a corrupt act, but not beyond that, because their worldview doesn't change. They still want to control, capture power, capture every element of the society, the NGOs, the media, and everything they want to control. So democracy doesn't work. So that's a big problem, and I'm sorry to say, I might sound a little bit pessimistic here, but it's not going to be settled by this protest. We have to have several other protests and national level understanding to actually make democracy work in future.
This is a time where all the voices from all the parts of country are emerging and should emerge, because we are moving towards a better, country and a change in the constitution and functioning. Do you think there will be representation of all parts of Nepal, be it, Madhesis, and also from the hills and also from indigenous communities? So how do you see this structure, and how do you see all the communities coming together in building a new Nepal?
Just like any major event anywhere in any democracy, there will be 3 types of groupings, right? And that orientation, you have also been part of some of those discussions. That has already started, right? So there will be 3 groupings. One is the status quoist group, those who want to continue the way the polity, the economy, the society works. That is status quoist group. Then there will be progressive groups, those who think that there are progressive elements in 2015 constitution, but they are not enough. We have to make it even more progressive, and more than the constitution, the way the state functions, we have to make it much more inclusive and much more progressive and much more democratic. So those, in my way of looking, will be the progressive thinking group, right? So they will also come together slowly. And then there will be third category, which has now become a little bit of fringe, is that going back, sliding back kind of a thing, right? Bring back the royal rule, etc. So those are also not going to die. They are also part and parcel of our polity. So they will also come under some kind of a grouping there. So those 3 groupings will eventually capture all the major political narratives of Nepal. I personally belong to the progressive group, right? The Nagarik Pratham Abhiyan is nothing but people first. But we have been saying that right now the situation has come to such a pass in Nepal that the elected government cannot function. It has hit its zenith in a way, right? So we need to have a part-time citizen government that we have been demanding for close to 2 years now. So it has happened, not because of us, but the kind, like our prediction turned out to be correct, right? It will be preposterous to claim that we have done it. We haven't done it, right? The younger generation has done it. But we have been saying all along, like we have spoken to Susila Karki 4 months ago, that if such a situation arises, will you be interested in taking it over? We spoke to 5 more people alongside Susila Karki, right?
This was a plan
Right.
ago?
So some would say that there was a plan. No, there was no plan, right? But we could see, living here and breathing here, we could see that things are moving in that direction. We never knew that the trigger will come that quick, right? But that's going to happen, right? That was not just me. Many people in Nepal were feeling. And we were also talking to the big parties, the big leaders also, that mend your ways, you are going to get in big trouble, right? But they would not listen to us. Who are we, right? So therefore, those things have happened, and therefore, sorry, I forgot your question.
Yeah, so it was about the representation from all parts of Nepal.
Sorry. Because of these three groupings, which is very natural to come after this event, the Generation Z protests, etc. So I think that all kind of opinions, the political narratives, will find place in the next elected parliament.
And do you think there will be enough representation of indigenous communities and Madhesis in the mainstream politics?
The good thing about Nepali democracy is that Nepali panchayats are super strong. They can have their own police also. They can make law, they can have their own police, etc. And they have substantial amount of funds also, right? So our local panchayats are super strong. And that is like the great thing about Nepal, seldom talked about in Indian media, right? And in the central parliament that we have, central level parliament, we have 60-40 rule. 60% people are coming from directly elected. So there is no inclusion in that. That's open for everybody. So obviously those people who have been ruling Nepal for a long time, they hold a bigger chances of winning those elections, and they win the election. Majority of people coming from, I would say, the ruling communities of Nepal, they take away those 60% seats, right? And then the 40% is actually split based on the ethnicity proportion, right? In India, the reservation is provided to the other backward castes, to the scheduled caste, but you cannot provide reservation to the Brahmins and the Kshatriyas, right? But in Nepal, the reservation is also provided to everybody, right? It's another unique thing about our constitution, right? So, because of...
Explain a little bit about that.
Okay. Yeah, of course. So, for example, there is a theory called affirmative action, we all know, right? Affirmative action is like whichever community or sexes have been oppressed in the past, they would now get a little bit better start, right? Therefore, some fairness will be achieved. Positive discrimination, affirmative action, right? So that is one thing. So you go by the affirmative action, and then you provide certain percentage of your jobs or certain percentage of your parliamentary positions to those oppressed communities, right? So that's affirmative action. Or you convert the entire 100% into ethnic proportions. That is proportional representation, right? That's not affirmative action, but proportional representation. People are happy with both the oppressed community. Here, what these idiots have done, 60% is free for all. If you are a Nepali, anybody can fight an election. So that's unreserved area. And that reserved area also has gone for proportional representation. That 40% has gone for proportional representation. So these people, probably, I would be a little bit off with the numbers, but say they have 70% representation. In the 60%, it's becoming a little bit complicated for you. In the 60%, they say they represent 70%. Right. And here, they represent 33% of this also, right? Yeah. So therefore, eventually, they will always have a majority. So it's a scam played on the oppressed communities, right? Which some have understood, some have not even understood, right? So therefore, eventually, if you look at the constitution of our parliament, it's always the so-called oppressor community, if there is any. That community always has a sway over will of the parliament, and it's still not proportional.
Got it. So even those 40%, which should ideally be there
just
for
oppressed
communities,
is also being distributed based on the ethnicity proportion.
An ethnicity which is, higher in hierarchy,
right.
To say.
They also right?
Got it. Very weird sense of distribution. Yeah, I think I am done with the questions, and I really thank you for the time and for your insights. Is there anything that you want to add from your end, want to say about?
Not necessarily. I have only one appeal. If the Indian media is listening to you, I think don't mind me saying it, but they have been very, very lazy, right? And Nepal is just in the neighborhood, right? You don't have to go to Canada or somewhere in Europe, right? It's Nepal. Like you can just literally drive to Nepal. So for Indian mainstream media to know so little about Nepal and the nuances of Nepal's politics is kind of mind-boggling, right? So when we listen to the reporting in Indian mainstream media, we don't know where to go. This is so far off from the truth that every Nepali knows, whether oppressed or oppressor. Everybody knows, right? That is not part of the discourse that anybody in India, the people of India who love us, I assume, they have no idea that Nepal is in such a situation, right? So they generally look at Nepal in a very monolithic way, right? This is Nepal. It has gone the China way. It has come back to India way, and those kind of like very childish kind of situation. It is big enough not to go China or India way and keep track of its own destination.
Which has been for years.
Which has been for like
Since the
forever,
beginning,
right?
forever,
Forever, right? So therefore, I think they have to do a little bit better work, and that is just not a professional comment, but that is also a compassionate appeal to Indian media that they should be knowing a little bit better about Nepal. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you so much. I think that's it. That's what we got to know about the things that are going to take place in Nepal, and I'm really hopeful that it goes in a very positive direction